Let's get this rocking. The last Q&A of the weekend. Please give it up for Brett Iwan, voice of Mickey Mouse. Right this way. So good to have you. Grab a seat. Awesome.
Hi, everyone.
Good morning, everybody.
So I got to ask you right off the bat, how many people have done the voice of Mickey Mouse?
So I am the fourth person to officially be in the role of Mickey Mouse. The first being Walt Disney himself, and then a gentleman named Jimmy McDonald took over after Walt Disney got a little busy, and then Wayne Allwine was my predecessor, and Wayne did it from 1977 all the way to 2009 when I was cast in the role.
What was the auditioning process like? That's such an iconic role.
Yeah.
What kind of pressure was there? And did they ever say anything about how Walt Disney got the original voice?
The audition process was actually very interesting and not your normal run-of-the-mill voice acting audition. So typically in the industry, if there's an opening for any role, the division in Disney will send out a casting call to different agencies around Los Angeles, around the country really. And then those agencies will pick from their talent pool and submit the people they think are best suited for those roles. As I understand it, that's how the process started for Mickey, but they weren't finding what they were looking for really. So the director of a department called Disney Character Voices decided, he said, you know what, as I just described, the three people who had voiced Mickey previously kind of just happened to come up through the company. You know, Walt gave Jimmy the role of Mickey Mouse by simply saying, I'm too busy, call Jimmy. And so Jimmy started voicing Mickey in the cartoons. Wayne actually was an apprentice of Jimmy McDonald's working in the sound effects department. And one day when someone didn't show up for the audition, they said, how about that guy that works with Jimmy? Have him come in on audition. So Rick is his name. Rick said, why don't we just look internally and see what we can find? So they sent out an email company-wide, and it said, do you want to be the voice of Mickey Mouse? And then it outlined the audition process that was happening and instructions on the lines you had to read and whatnot. Well, my friend works for the company. She knew that I was a huge Mickey fan and have been my entire life. We met in art school, and we went to school in Florida, so we'd go to the theme parks every once in a while, and when we'd get into the park, I'd say, oh boy, and everyone would laugh. And that was about the extent of my Mickey impression, but she knew I did a Mickey voice. So she sent me this email and said, you gotta try out for this. And I thought, why not? Like, I was working as a professional artist for Hallmark greeting cards in Kansas City, Missouri, and loving it, but I still loved Mickey and I still dreamed of working for Disney someday. And I just thought it'd be a really cool story to tell someday around the table and say, you know what, one day back in 2009, I auditioned to be Mickey Mouse. How cool is that? Never thinking it would go any further than that. But obviously it did. So I submitted my audition, and they liked what they heard. They called me and invited me to come out to California, which I did. I did another audition. And then after that, I started doing what they called trial recording sessions. So there was projects that had to be done, and I was flown out to California to record them, but it was understood that it wasn't an official offer for the job yet. I was still just kind of auditioning, as it were. Now, it's worth saying I was auditioning to be Wayne Allwine's understudy. So Wayne had been doing it for 32 years at this point. He was experiencing some health difficulties, which made it harder for him to sustain the falsetto. And so they thought they'd look for somebody who could kind of work alongside him and learn the role. Unfortunately, Wayne passed away during this process. So by the time I was officially cast, I was just kind of thrown into the mix. I had to kind of learn on the fly. Thankfully, everyone at Disney is so loving and protective of this role that they gave me a lot of advice and made sure that I received what I would have received from Wayne himself. So it was a very random, the way it fell into my life, and not really the traditional audition process, but one that I'm very grateful for. Yeah.
So I got to ask you, your voice of Mickey Mouse, comparable to the other three, which one do you think you're closest to, or which one do you strive to be the closest to?
That's a great question. You know, when I started, I really was doing my best to emulate Wayne Allwine, because for me, Wayne was the Mickey I really grew up with. He voiced Mickey in more projects than anybody else up to date at that point. Because if you think about it, when Walt started with Steamboat Willie, and to your earlier question, how did Walt come up with the voice? I've heard stories that, you know, Walt was having people come into the studio in the 20s to audition to be the voice of Mickey Mouse, and he wasn't hearing what he liked, and he kept saying, no, it's like this. And eventually they just said, well, Walt, why don't you just do it? So that's how he started voicing Mickey. But for me, growing up with Wayne, who started in the 70s, right around the time when in the 80s they created the Disney Channel, and so Mickey was on TV constantly. You had both parks at this point, because Disney World opened in 1971. Disneyland had been around since 1955, so you had parades and whatnot that Mickey was appearing in. You had records. You had a lot of stuff where you were hearing Mickey's voice. And Wayne was responsible for recording those things. So I grew up hearing Wayne in Mickey's Christmas Carol and Mickey Mouse Works, later on in Mickey Mouse Club, so many things.
Did he do the voice for Mouse Factory?
He did, yeah,
Oh, that was
absolutely.
a great show.
Yeah. So when I started, I was really working to preserve Wayne's voice. And when you listen to some of my earlier episodes of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, hopefully you hear it the way I do. I was really trying my best to emulate him. Now, naturally, as you go into any voice acting job, and I've been doing it now for 15 years, you just kind of move out of the emulation side of things, and you start to just kind of mold yourself into the character. And so I like to think that I do my best to of course, honor Walt and Jimmy and what they brought to the character, and Wayne, and it's just, we kind of all meld together in a way. But I love a quote that Jimmy McDonald said to Wayne Allwine when Wayne took over. He said, "Remember, kid, you're only filling in for the boss." The boss being Walt Disney. Because as I just mentioned, literally Jimmy was in the room and Walt said, "Call Jimmy." So he really felt he was just filling in for Walt until Walt could come back to do it. So yeah, there's been a lot of projects where I have had to do a Walt Disney, more Walt Mickey, a more Wayne Mickey, and there's those subtle differences. Wayne is really responsible for that two-beat laugh that everyone knows, was Wayne. Walt kind of did a little chuckle. So there's subtle differences, and each project calls for a little different nuance.
How many years did Walt Disney do that voice then?
So he started in 1928 with Steamboat Willie, and fun fact, he voiced Mickey and Minnie in that cartoon. And if you've watched it recently, you know that they really just squawk. It's just kind of ha, ha, ha. It's not really talking. So he started in 1928, and he did it all the way till production of Fun and Fancy Free, which featured Mickey and the Beanstalk. And so that would have been around I believe that was 1937.
Was that before or after Fantasia?
That would have been after Fantasia. Yeah, so Walt voiced Mickey in Fantasia, yeah.
Mr. Sikowski.
Yeah, that's Walt, yeah. Yeah.
So how do you protect your voice? I mean, it's such a valuable instrument. Do you have a regiment? Do you have certain gargles, certain exercises you do just to make sure you're staying good?
I wish I had some consistent approach, but unfortunately I've learned over the years there is no consistent approach to preserving your voice other than common sense, right? Like I avoid loud parties, loud concerts, loud restaurants, those kind of environments.
And you're not a smoker.
And I'm not a smoker. I'm not a smoker, So you just kind of use common sense when it comes to that stuff. Depending on how you're feeling before a recording session, there are different techniques you can use. I've learned to love a technique called the straw technique, which is often used for singers. It's as simple as doing warm-ups through a coffee stirrer straw, and that restriction of air kind of helps you focus on muscles that are deeper than you would otherwise. It kind of opens up your sinuses and the vocal cords. Cough drops, tea, all of that. Whenever I'm losing my voice, people always say, "Oh, you need some hot tea and honey," which is great, but that doesn't always work. I wish it was that simple, but it's not.
Do you have a certain regiment you do before you go into a recording session?
That changes too, honestly, depending on the day. It's funny, most days when I wake up and I have to record, I do this really weird thing where I go, "Ah," to see how much of the and you can hear I'm very raspy because I've been talking for 3 days. So if I was like this today going into a recording studio, I'd be a little bit worried. But that usually gives me an indication of where Mickey's at, strength-wise, because there's days when I go, nothing comes out. So it's a good indicator. But yeah, it just changes every day. In California we have weird allergies, we have different weather, and so it's always, airplanes don't help. Being on airplanes dries me out very quickly. Yeah.
How long is a typical recording day, if there is such a thing as a typical recording day?
It really varies. We have a really interesting thing with the Screen Actors Guild, which is our union that kind of regulates how recording sessions run, and the most you can do for one character is 4 hours a day. Now, voice actors who do multiple characters, they might have multiple 4-hour sessions in a day. But with Mickey, we've learned over the years that 4 hours is really kind of pushing it. People ask, does it hurt to do Mickey's voice? And it doesn't hurt to do Mickey's voice. Again, it's just a falsetto. It's a higher range, lots of air going through your sinuses. But I always say, if you stood in front of a microphone and talked for 4 hours straight, would your voice get tired? And most likely it would. Because how a recording session works is that we'll have the lines on the page and the script is usually broken down, right? Like if I'm talking to Goofy, I'll have a line and then Goofy has a line and then Minnie, whatever. So we just go through and do all the Mickey lines. And for each line, I will give 3 takes. I will give an A, B, and C. And with each of those, you try to vary it up a bit because you're trying to offer the director, some choices. So say,
Well, hiya, Goof. Well, hiya, Goof. Oh, gosh. Oh, well, hiya, Goof.
they're all a little different, and the director then can choose which nuances he wants. And if he doesn't find what he's looking for in those 3, then you do it again. So a session, we're working on Mickey Mouse Clubhouse Plus right now. It's going to be coming out next year. And I'd say an episode, which is a 22-minute episode, usually takes us around probably about an hour, maybe a little bit longer to do a whole episode. And that's just the dialogue. And then we usually come back and do the songs later on. So there's lots of singing involved in those shows. But so a typical recording day is usually, it could be, I've gone into the booth for 5 minutes before. And then there's days where I'm there for the full 4 hours. So it kind of just varies from project to project.
So as far as back into prep, do the voice actors really have like table reads? Do you actually have any interactions with the other voice actors, or it's just here's your script, here's your line, the director's all going to piece it together?
Yeah, so anymore, we rarely do what they call ensemble reads. So yeah, we don't have, the projects I'm working on, we don't do table reads. I know shows like The Simpsons or Family Guy, they do a table read, which is kind of customary for a sitcom. Actors who are actually on camera together will sit around the table, literally sit around a table and read the script together to kind of get used to interacting with each other. We don't do that, and I wish we did, because I interact more with my castmates at conventions like this than I do on the actual job. And you have fun, you're influenced by each other. Thankfully, we know each other so well, and we know how we deliver the characters so well that I can kind of imagine if I'm doing a scene with Goofy, I know how Bill Farmer would read the line. And in circumstances where maybe he offered something really unique and he happened to record before me, the director will play his line ahead of mine to influence what I do. And so that's always helpful. But yeah, I wish we were all together, but it's actually easier now with technology, since we're not recording onto tape like they used to do, to record it digitally and then just put it all together in the end. It's a much cleaner and more efficient process that way.
And do you ever really sit back and watch the finished product just to see exactly how your work all fits in?
Absolutely. I'm very excited to sit back and watch what I just did. So one of the things that just came out, I think last week or the week prior, is called Mickey and the Very Many Christmases. It's a new 22-minute Christmas special that's on Disney+. And I couldn't wait for that to come out. I sat down and watched it the night it came out. So I love to see how this stuff, the final animation looks, how the final story comes together, and how it sounds, honestly. I mean, I think, I'm an artist. I'm always going to be very critical of my own work. But I think one way you grow and learn is to kind of self-evaluate in a way. So I find it helpful. Early on, I didn't usually like what I had done, but now I'm getting to the point where I can go, oh, it's pretty good.
So I got to ask you, this is the voice, Mickey Mouse. When you first heard that you officially had the job, did you do anything special to celebrate?
That's a great question. I don't know if I did. It's funny, there's a really great interview with Wayne Allwine and his wife, Russi Taylor. Russi voiced Minnie alongside Wayne, and fun fact, Mickey and Minnie were married in real life. And they do a great interview with Leonard Maltin, and he asked the same question. And Wayne says, it was very uneventful. He goes, you'd imagine that there was trumpets and confetti, and they say, you are the voice of Mickey Mouse. And he goes, it wasn't. They just said, hey, Wayne's going to do it. Same for me. I ended a Disney on Ice recording session. They said, we'd like to talk to you afterwards in the green room. I went back and they said, we like what you're doing. We'd really like you to be the official voice of Mickey if you're interested. And I remember thinking in my head, should I think about this? Like, if you're interested, like let me ponder that for a minute. I took no time to say, yes, I'm interested, please. And again, I was flying back and forth from Kansas City at this point, so I had to catch a plane ride home. I did have some time to kill, and it wasn't a big celebration, but what I did was I left the studio, the recording studio, which was in a different location than the Disney lot that you might imagine. If you've watched any of Walt Disney's old Disneyland TV shows, he often gave you behind-the-scenes looks at the studios. Well, we were recording in a separate place, but I walked down to the studio, and I walked around the lot, and I had my iPad with me, or my iPod with me at the time, and I listened to When You Wish Upon a Star, and I walked around, and I just thought, I remember thinking to myself, savor this moment because your life's about to change. And I had no idea how it would, but I just kind of took a moment for myself, and it was really special. So it wasn't a huge celebration. The process of that unfolding and moving to California and getting started was long and drawn out and somewhat uneventful. I lived in a camping trailer for a while, but it's a memory that I for sure cherish. Yeah.
So aside from doing like the animation, do you do any of the voiceover work for like Disney World or Disneyland, like a lot of the announcement stuff? Do you record that?
Yeah, so my role is so special in that I get to work on everything. So for sure, the animated cartoons, I do everything for the theme parks, the parades, and the castle shows. Disney Cruise Line, if you're ever on the ships and you see Mickey performing there, that's me. All the toys and video games. If we have any Kingdom Hearts fans, Epic Mickey fans, I'm trying to think, what was the other? There's been a lot of Dreamlight Valley, all of those video games I get to be a part of. If anyone's got an Apple Watch with a Mickey on it and you tap and he says,
It's 12:15.
that's me as well. So yeah, I do everything. I got to work on a really special project. I think it was something, about stuffing stockings for children, and Mickey was narrating that. I just did that last week. I'm gonna go back in the studio for Mickey Mouse Clubhouse this week. But it's always changing, always changing.
Do you have to do like a different timing, working with video game, working with animation, working with announcements? Is there much guidance with the timing you have? Because they say if you're doing a watch, you've got 2 seconds to do this, that kind of thing.
Yeah, every project demands a little different dynamic, and it's a really good thing to be aware of that. If you're doing a Disney on Ice show, Mickey is in the middle of a giant ice rink in a huge arena, and when he talks, his voice is going to echo. So you keep that in mind when you're saying, where if you think of like a conversation. On a TV show, Mickey walks up and says,
Hiya, Goof.
he's right next to each other. If he's in an arena and Goofy's all the way on the other side,
Hiya, Goof.
you got to give it a little bit more time to echo and reverb around the space. So you do have to be aware of that. Same thing goes for parks. So a lot of the times these sessions will start with the director saying, here's the circumstance. You're on the stage in front of Cinderella's castle. The ensemble of characters is coming out. Just so it kind of sets the stage in your mind to know the dynamics of volume and range and all of that stuff. Or it could be like this is a cruise ship show and you're on the top deck outside, or you're on the cruise ship in the middle of the atrium. All of those things come into play and how you approach it. Yeah.
So I got to ask you, before Mickey Mouse, did you do any other voices? Did you always find yourself a mimic, or was just Mickey always in your heart?
Yeah, I'm a little bit different than other voice actors because a lot of times they'll say, I've been doing voices since I was a kid. I emulated Fred Flintstone and all of that. I don't remember doing that. Voice acting was not really on my radar career-wise. I knew I wanted to work for Disney. I was a huge admirer, and still am, of Walt Disney in particular. So I wanted to be an animator. From a very early age, I knew I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to go to school for animation. I wanted to work for Disney. As I grew up and went to college, and my career prospects expanded, I saw a world outside of that, and I ended up, like I mentioned, working for Hallmark greeting cards. I was an illustrator. But I never lost sight of that desire to work for Disney. So to answer your question, no, I really didn't emulate. I wasn't really, if I wasn't thinking about it in terms of doing impressions other than Mickey. And that really was because I just loved Mickey. My grandpa did a Donald Duck impression occasionally, and I remember I had a book, an anniversary edition about Donald Duck, and in it was an article written by the voice of Donald Duck, Clarence Nash, the original voice of Donald Duck, and he outlined how to do the voice of Donald Duck. And I would read that, and I'd try to put your tongue on the roof of your mouth and do this. And I couldn't do it. And I remember at a certain point I thought, well, if I can't do Donald, I'm going to do Mickey. Because to me, he was cooler anyway. So as a kid, I would listen to different Disney records, in particular the soundtrack to Fantasmic, a show at Disneyland and Hollywood Studios, and I would emulate that for fun. And I remember thinking, oh, I kind of sound like him, but again, never aspiring to be. I remember thinking it'd be really cool to be the voice of Mickey Mouse. Wow, whoever has that job is really lucky. But it wasn't really on my radar in terms of how do you pursue that. So I wasn't really practicing other voices. And to this day, a lot of people say, what other voices do you do? And I've done some small things on different Mickey shows. Maybe, it's like, oh, there's this character over here that's going to say a line, or there's this ghost in this thing. And I've done some small stuff, but I don't do any, there's so many actors out there who will say, here's my list of credits, and mine's Mickey Mouse. But if you're only going to do one character, I think Mickey's okay to be the top billing character.
I think so.
I'm okay with that.
We're going to get to questions in just a bit. I have one
Great.
more. Now, you're doing Comic-Cons. You're seeing a lot of people and interacting. Any special interactions that you've had with fans over the years as doing this?
So many special interactions. I always say I am still such a huge Disney fan and such a huge Mickey fan that I really just honestly feel like all of you. I'm just excited by the stuff that Mickey gets to be a part of, and the fact that I get to do it is still just kind of mind-boggling to me. And so anytime I get to meet people who are excited about their trip to Disney World or whatever, I love talking about that because it's like, you know what, I was just in Disneyland and this was my favorite thing to do. But it's always so great to hear how much Mickey means to people. It's a great reminder. It's also very humbling to remember that I get to be a part of a character that is so powerful in determining people's happiness, and influencing people's happiness. I love a quote that Walt said when he mentioned Mickey was a small character assigned to the purpose of laughter. He's just a simple character. He's supposed to be every man. Everyone can relate to him. I know I get to be Mickey's voice for now. For how long, I don't know. I hope I get to do it for many more decades. And then somebody else will take over. And then I'll just be one of those names of the guys who did it. So I cherish the time that I get to spend with the character. And I love knowing that people care about the character as much as I do.
What do you think about Mickey's personality? He has lasted over 100 years, longer than any other cartoon character,
Yeah.
maybe even more so than like Popeye, because that was around the same time. What do you think about the personality of Mickey Mouse that just makes him last?
Yeah, I think, honestly, it's his simplicity and it's his consistency. I think where you run into trouble is when you try to take a character like Mickey and mold him to be what might be deemed as relevant or trendy. Mickey's power is that Mickey Mouse, who we get introduced to at a very young age, let's say 1, 2, 3, is the same character now for me in my 40s. He hasn't changed. And that grounding connection to something that's so nostalgic, so lovable and consistent, I think is why he's lasted as long as he has. A great artist at Disney, Floyd Norman, was part of a documentary series that I was in called Mickey, the Story of a Mouse. It's on Disney Plus if you haven't seen it. And Floyd puts it perfectly. He says, Mickey is a reflection of all of us. Humanity has changed so much since Mickey was introduced in 1928. And Mickey kind of does a great job of, he doesn't ever chase the trends, but he does reflect the world in the moment that he's in, right? And I think, Mickey kind of just growing up alongside of us is what makes him so powerful. So his personality has stayed the same. He's happy-go-lucky. He's the leader of the club, but he's a little fallible at times. He can mess up. He can get frustrated, but he picks himself up and he's, does his best to maintain a happy-go-lucky attitude. And I think we all kind of hope to be that way, or at least need that, even if we're unaware.
I got one more question before we go to the audience. There's just so many great pieces of the puzzle. I got to ask you this last one thing. As Mickey Mouse, the voice actor, how much do you work per year? Is it like months at a time? Do you have time off? I mean, what exactly is schedule? Is it rigid? Is it all over the place?
Anything in Hollywood and entertainment is all over the place. I always say it ebbs and it flows. It kind of comes and it goes. Mickey is extremely consistent, though. So I'm in the studio usually on average 2 or 3 times a week. There are weeks, of course, where nothing gets scheduled, but for the past few years, I've been in the studio at least once a week, if not twice a week. I've usually got an episode of a TV show I'm working on and then some other project, or I might do an episode on one day and then go in for music for that show another day. So it's very consistent for me, which is great because I do have the flexibility. You know, I'm not a 9 to 5. It's funny, some people in the Disney company think that they can just call up Disney character voices and say, I need a recording of Mickey. And they think they're just going to walk down the hallway to my office and bring me in, and they have to explain, no, they're contracted actors who have lives outside of these roles. But it's a great flexibility in that I have maintained my artistic career, so I've had opportunities to still be an artist, so I work freelance at home as an artist, and then I go into the studio when I'm needed for Mickey.
Do you ever paint Mickey Mouse?
I do, and actually I had an amazing honor of painting Mickey's 95th anniversary portrait last year. So Mickey's, 96 now? Last November he celebrated 96. So his 95th anniversary, the Walt Disney Company commissioned me to paint his portrait, which is only the 8th official portrait of Mickey ever done. It's an amazing tradition started by Disney animator and legendary Imagineer named John Hench. He started the tradition back in 1953. Walt said, I want to have a portrait of Mickey done. Let's have a contest at the studio and people can submit their paintings. John Hench's won, and it's this great picture of Mickey kind of standing in front of his office bookcase with a few of his awards. And it's one that I've admired and been aware of since I was a little kid. And then there were, John Hench did 5 more portraits. And then there was 2 other artists who did the 6th and 7th portrait. And then I was asked to do his 8th portrait.
Was it oil or digital? How did you?
It was oil. It was a traditional oil painting. Did it on canvas in my home studio. And then it was actually presented at Destination D, a fan event that happens in Florida. It was part of the D23 fan club. After that, it was sent to London to be exhibited as part of the D100 traveling exhibit, which is going around the country. I don't know, many of you may have caught it in Philadelphia. I think is one of the first places it was at. And since the painting left London, I believe it's now in Kansas City. I'm not sure where it will go as part of that tour after that, but eventually it'll land and live in the Walt Disney Archives and all the portraits are hung in their reading room area, so you can go in and see them. And again, I've been a huge admirer of those paintings for so long. Every time I go in there and get to see the actual thing, it's kind of nuts.
You got the voice and the art.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm sorry to ask so many questions. Let's get some from the audience. We haven't got a lot of time.
So many hands. Whoa.
I know. Thanks.
Hi, I have 2 questions that are basically related. What comes first, the voice recording or the animation? And then how do they sync the voice recording to the animation to make it believable that Mickey Mouse is actually saying what he's actually saying?
Great questions. And so my answers kind of go hand in hand. We record the voices first, and this has been traditional since the very beginning. You record the voices of the characters first, and then the animators will actually break down the audio recordings into frames. And they'll figure out that in this frame, Mickey's making an ooh sound, and this one he's making an e sound. And so that determines how they draw his mouth shapes to emulate. So the final animation, that's why it looks like the mouth is synced to the character voice. There are very rare occasions where we do something called ADR, which means animation already exists, and we're putting in the voice after the fact. And I love that because it's almost like a video game. They set up the clip, you get 3 beeps, which kind of determine the timing. So you go beep, 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 and then you do your voice, and you try to make it match. That's actually how we do a lot of Kingdom Hearts video games. At least everything up until 3 was already animated in Japan with the Japanese, and so we'd have to come in and make our English fit into what was already animated for Mickey. So that was always challenging, because a lot of times Japanese syllables are a lot more than English, and so the dialogue in Kingdom Hearts can sometimes be a little bit drawn out because of that. But traditionally, we voice first and then animate second. Thanks.
So I got about foreign language Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
Do you have to learn other languages phonetically?
There have been a handful of projects where I have voiced Mickey in foreign dialects, and in that case, we'll have an expert there to kind of coach me. But Character Voices International is responsible for making sure that wherever Mickey or any Disney character is heard around the world, they've cast somebody to emulate our performances. I just had the pleasure of meeting the South Korean Mickey Mouse. He was on vacation and asked to come to the studio and meet me. And he shared how he watches my cartoons and he's tried to emulate me. He wanted to know what I thought of his Mickey, and I thought he was great. I didn't understand a word he was saying, but it sounded good.
Another question, please.
When you were little, were there any shows that you liked to watch?
Yes, so many shows I like to watch. You mean Disney shows or? Well, let's see. I'm trying to think. Well, it wasn't really a show, but one of my favorites is Mickey Mouse Christmas Carol, Mickey's Christmas Carol. I still watch that to this day. One of my favorite Christmas specials. I really loved Mickey Mouse Works. I thought that was fun because it was Mickey and all the different characters coming together. I loved Disney Afternoon was big when I was a kid. So you had Tailspin, Rescue Rangers, Darkwing Duck, DuckTales. All of those really resonate in my memory. But I also just loved all the classics. I had I had Pinocchio and Snow White and Robin Hood, all on video that I could watch all the time, and I watched them all the time because I loved them. I really loved Aladdin. I remember when I'm old enough to know when Aladdin came out in theaters. I got to go see it. And Little Mermaid even. So all of those, the renaissance of Disney animation really have influenced me a lot.
Let's get a few more questions.
I was wondering if you had any trouble saying specific words, using the Mickey voice.
Not really. Mickey's voice doesn't really restrict me from saying any words. Sometimes, articulation is important depending on what we're working on. So if you're working on a toy and it's going to be coming from a small little sound chip, you really have to over-articulate the words like can't and didn't, and so you talk in a different way. I don't have any words that are really hard for me to say. Fun fact for you though, Walt Disney had a word he couldn't say, and it was aluminum. And he'd say aluminum. So it was really hard for him. He had like a Finding Nemo moment. And then I'm an enemy.
Okay, next question, please.
If you can say your favorite line in the Mickey voice, could you?
Some imagination, huh?
There you go.
It's from Tasmic. Going brain dead.
All these
Fantasmic.
questions about voices and things, I want to really make a Bat movie with the crew, the Ice Nine Kills crew, but that brings me to ask, what's your favorite learning style, and are analogies better for you?
My favorite learning style? My favorite learning style is actually just learning on the job, hands-on learning. I learn best by doing. The classroom setting is always great, but I'm much more of a hands-on learner, so that's the benefit of kind of falling into the role the way I did, is that I kind of just had to learn on the job. My first time in a sound booth was recording for real. It wasn't just pretend. But at the same time, I've taken improv classes, I've taken acting classes, because I think learning in a group environment is always great to kind of have a collaborative experience and learn from others. So kind of do half and half, but hands-on is definitely best for me.
So we got time for two more questions. Brett, you're going to be headed back to your table.
Yes, sir.
So if you haven't had time to ask you want to hang out with Mickey Mouse. So needless to say, two more questions, and we're going to send him on his way.
You want me to pick? I can't choose.
I'll pick.
I'll answer
this
quickly.
side, over there. Right there.
I want them to like me.
All right, hello, Brett. Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank you for being the official voice of Mickey Mouse after Wayne Allwine's passing.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So my two-part question for you is, what was the challenging part for you for taking over for Wayne to voice Mickey Mouse? And also, what can we expect in the future for Mickey Mouse in both Disney and Kingdom Hearts 4 onward?
Oh, great question. Well, I don't know anything about Kingdom Hearts 4, unfortunately. A lot of people ask us that, and here's a great example. I didn't know about Kingdom Hearts 4 until you all told me. I was at a convention and someone came up and said, man, the Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer looks great. And I said, what? I didn't even know. But I can guarantee that there's always exciting stuff for Mickey. We're getting very close to Mickey's 100th, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of exciting things Mickey will be a part of for that. To answer your first question, the most challenging part about taking over for the legend Wayne Allwine, I think, is just there are so many expectations when it comes to Mickey. And I think the part of the job that kind of goes unrecognized that Wayne had to deal with, and I've learned over the years, is that those opinions, those multitude of opinions come with a lot of struggles, actually. There's always somebody at the studio who thinks Mickey should do this differently or sound like this, so you're kind of always up against this battle of keeping Mickey consistent, and it's really hard. There's an unspoken role in being the voice of one of these legacy characters, is that you kind of have to be the caretaker in a way. You really need to learn beyond just making a sound and reading the words on the page. You really do need to know, how would Mickey say this? How would he, act in this situation? Because they bring in so many different creative people, whether they're writers or story artists or animators, who are all coming with their own filter of who Mickey is. And a lot of times, maybe unintentionally, they don't quite hit the mark. So when you're in a recording session and there's a line, you might think like, oh, actually it's better said this way, and it'll sound more Mickey. And so that's the thing I've learned over the years, I think, and I know Wayne was really great at. And the thing is, that comes with time, right? Like, he had been doing it for 32 years. Those people respected him, and that's something I had to earn. I couldn't come in 2 months into the job and say, no, Mickey would do it this way, because they'd say, get out of here, kid. So I kind of had to learn how to build those relationships and build that trust. But yeah, it's a challenging part, and Wayne, I know, faced several times people tried to recast Wayne to use somebody else because they thought their cousin did a better Mickey voice. and that happens to this day, unfortunately, so yeah.
Okay, Sean, you're picking the last question. It's on you.
You know what, we're going to do these last two. I'm going to answer them really
All right.
fast because both of them.
All
so
right,
let's start
sounds
with
good.
him.
There you go. Nice compromise. Make them quick.
So my question is, I wanted to know how your experience was filming the episode The Wizard of Diz.
The
Mickey
Wizard of
Mouse
Diz.
Clubhouse.
Yeah.
And if you know, like, how that originated, like, who came up with the idea to do that collaboration?
I don't know who came up with the idea to do it. I know at the time that was season 5 of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, and we did a lot of those longer extended specials. And we did one inspired by like Rocky Horror Picture Show, and then of course The Wizard of Oz. And those were a blast because I think it gave the creatives a chance to kind of get a little bit away from that educational heavy presence that Mickey Mouse Clubhouse was known for, and gave the characters a chance to play. Personally, I love treating Mickey and all those characters like they're actors, right? So they get to step into the role. I'm trying to remember, was Mickey the Tin Man? Yeah, he was. I think we should do a Wicked crossover now. But it was great. It's always a lot of fun to kind of stretch those characters' legs. Yeah, good question. Thanks for watching that. Last question.
Yes. Do you feel incredible pressure, anxiety, apprehension, trepidation, voicing this character? This character is so iconic. It's almost 100 years old. The original creator was the original voice as well. Do you feel such an incredible pressure to not mess up this legacy?
Absolutely. There's a lot of pressure that comes with Mickey Mouse, and I think whenever you're facing pressure, you do have anxieties, and you have hesitations, and you have worry, and those are all very real emotions and experiences that I have voicing this character. Mickey is known for being happy, and so a lot of times people expect you to be happy 100% of the time. But truth be told, no one's happy 100% of the time. So I've had bad days where I've had to go into the recording studio and act as if I'm happy, because that's how Mickey's being portrayed. So yeah, I think we all face those challenges day to day, and that Mickey is no exception. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Brett.
Thank you,
what
everybody.
a wonderful
Thank you.
experience having you here. Ladies and
Thanks,
gentlemen, Brett
everyone.
Iwan headed back to his table. I'll take that from you, sir. Please give it up. The voice of Mickey Mouse. Thank you, Brett. Cheers.